Hey, I'm Dave Isaacs, and this is a lesson on strumming, something that you might have thought of as being so fundamental that you never even really gave it much thought once you learned how to move your hand back and forth. And in some ways, it can be that simple, but there's so much more to think about. And I work with a lot of strummers. I work with a lot of songwriters and singers who play to accompany themselves. And one of the things that I hear over and over again is, I'd like to be able to do more. I feel like my strumming is boring. And what people tend to do is they come in and say, can you teach me some new strums? My response to that is, I can teach you how to strum and what the variables are that allow you to change up your strumming and make things more interesting. So let's take a look at this. I want to talk about some basic mechanics first. Now, let me say at the outset, and I say this often with regard to all kinds of topics, there really isn't one right or wrong way. When you start watching different players, you will absolutely see lots of variation from one person to another. And so it really isn't right for me to say, that's wrong and that's right, because you can find all these examples of really good players that might do it differently than the way that I'm describing. But the way that I tend to look at technique is that there are fundamental things that are just set as they are. The guitar is made the way it's made. Your body is made the way that it's made. And so there are mechanical principles at work here because these are mechanisms. The hand, the arm, the whole body have a way that they're constructed, and the same goes for the guitar. We're just trying to get this to get along with that the best possible way. So, with that said, a lot of people learn to strum as simply swing the arm back and forth. And that's basically true. There's your fundamental thing. And so there's really just two variables. Do you go down or do you go up? And that's why as a beginner you tend to learn strums as down, down, up, down, up, down. Or down, down, up, down. Down, up, down, up, down, down, up. Whatever that happens to be. And that just means that you're moving your arm along with the timeline of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. That's fundamental. That is the way that it works. However, there's some other aspects to it, and there's two primary ones that you really want to think about. This is something I talk about a lot. So it's an idea that I've referred to in other videos as well, but it always bears revisiting because it's always applicable, and it's something that a lot of people do need reminding of when they're trying to make things more interesting. Along with whether you're going down or going up, you can also think about where you're hitting the strings. So in other words, I might choose to swing across all the strings, or I might choose to aim just for the basses, or a single bass note. I might choose to aim just for the trebles, or just the middle. Now when you start to take this approach, this allows you to start to orchestrate. In other words, instead of looking at the chord as a single thing, in the sense that it's binary, it's either on or off. You hit the strings or you don't. And that is a topic we can talk about in terms of deciding strum direction, in the sense that the way to figure out a strum pattern, the pattern of downs and ups for a particular rhythm, is really just to look at the way the rhythm breaks down, get the arm moving back and forth, and either you hit the strings or you don't. So in other words, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, you would articulate with alternate down and up strokes. And so to play steady quarter notes would be repeated downs. 1, 2, 3, 4. If I want to add some eighth notes in between, I'll just hit the strings when I'm moving up. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. If I want a syncopated rhythm, I'll leave out a downstroke. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So that's a good fundamental idea to go with, the idea that the strumming hand is pretty much always in motion. And the thing is, this is a lot more fluid and relaxed than this. It certainly feels better to me, and if I switch back and forth between them, I think you'll hear a difference in the amount of rhythmic drive in those two strums. Here's one. Here's another. Here's one. To my ear, that second one is static. It doesn't move the same way. Now that raises the question of why is that, and this is the other factor that we're talking about when it comes to strumming. I mentioned the variable of bringing out low, middle, or high. The other is dynamics. How hard do you hit it? When I change from the one strum pattern to the other, the change is dynamic and also tonal in the sense that the different pick stroke is bringing out a different part of the string. So for example, the upstrokes bring out more of the high strings. The downstroke tends to be a little louder because it's got the full force of the swinging arm with gravity behind it. So those two factors put the accents in a particular place. Bum, 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 bum. Do, do, da, do, da, do, do, da, do, da. That accent on the 4 count's important. Now here's what happens if I use the other strum, the one where I don't keep moving. Down, up, down, up, down. That puts the accents on 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now that second strum, or rather the end of 2, bum, boo, bum, boo, bum, that beat is meant to be accented, but it still needs to feel like an offbeat. There's a sense of lift that comes from that in-between 8th note, the end of 2. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. If I slow it down, you could almost hear it as if it's suspended, or rather, the beat is suspended for a moment between the two up strums. 1 and down, up, lift, up, down. Boo, boo, ba, boo, ba, boo, ba, boo, ba. We lose that effect if I don't keep swinging the arm. It stays on the ground. Instead of boo, ba, ba, boo, ba, ba. This tells you something really fundamental about rhythm. It's that for a groove to come to life, for a rhythm to have movement, and consequently make you and your listener want to move, it needs to have a dynamic sense. And that dynamic sense, the louder and softer, stronger and weaker accents, creates this sense of movement. And without getting too cosmic about it, okay, but rhythm is, well, it's not cosmic at all. Rhythm is a very fundamental thing. It's physical, right? I had someone try to tell me once, this was a supposed musicologist with great knowledge in music, and he said, well, you know, rhythm is abstract. And I thought, you're crazy and you obviously can't dance because there's nothing abstract about air molecules physically hitting your body and your eardrums at intervals in time. When you listen to music and you're hearing the beat, feeling the beat, that's exactly what's happening. Go stand in front of a subwoofer the next time you're out at a concert or a club. You will feel that air moving, okay? So the idea is there's a physical sense of this, And because in our bodies, the things that we do in rhythm tend to have strong and weak beats, like your heartbeat, boop, 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 like walking, taking steps, like breathing. These things all have an up and a down, an in and an out. And so your strumming has to feel the same way, and that's why this back and forth approach makes so much sense. Your brain and your body process that sense of strong beat, weak beat, of step and lift, and it makes the music, the rhythm, feel very natural. Now, this doesn't mean that you can't choose a different strum pattern for a particular musical reason. You might decide, for example, that repeated downstrokes on the eighth note sounds the best. As opposed to but even then, if I'm doing that, I am going to think about the dynamics and the difference between striking with a little more energy and a little bit less, and which strings I'm hitting. So the difference between a uniform sound and a little bit of variation in the dynamics. Notice that when I want to make a little less sound, I'm actually striking fewer strings. I'm also moving a little bit less. This is really the big fundamental, okay? If you're going to get two ideas out of this, one is the idea that most of the time you're just going to mark out time going back and forth, down, up, to either match the eighth note, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or the 16th note if it's a faster, busier strum. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1 and 2. The alternate strum, the alternate down and upstroke, is whatever the fastest rhythmic subdivision is. So if you're breaking up into eighth notes, your eighth notes are down and up. If you're breaking up into 16ths, your 16th notes are down and up. So in any case, that's the one big idea, you're going back and forth. And the other is that in the course of doing that, you can aim for different places. And the way that you create different sounds is simply by moving less or more over different areas of the strings. So I'm just going to strum a little bit and explore this. And I'm going to use that same rhythm pattern I did first. Fill in some more space, I can strike the strings very lightly in between the beats with what I like to call a ghost strum. It's just a very gentle brush of the strings. So I'm moving constantly, hitting the strings each time, but you still get bum, 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 bum. And you can also change things up, the way a drummer might play a fill at the end of a phrase. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, and 3, and 4, and 1. Now, how exactly you choose to apply this is up to you. This is really something for you to explore. It's a big picture idea, but it's something that's going to really do a lot to bring your strumming to life. And you're going to need to experiment with it. If you try too hard to just control, here's the low, here's the high, and just do it that way, there's value in that, but at the same time, you need to be able to learn to do this fluidly. And so the first thing you do is just play with how you strum, Ask yourself if it's fluid. Ask yourself if you have enough range of motion to bring out low strings or high strings, and to be able to get some dynamics, lighter sounds and louder sounds, less energy, more energy. So get to know the way you strum. Pay attention to what's happening there in your strumming hand. And as you get more familiar, you'll be able to develop more control, use more variation. As I said, there's value in learning specific patterns and just practicing those, but this is ultimately something you want to be able to work with in real time. Again, it's dynamic in the sense that it can change, and so it can be something you've memorized, but it's much better for your long-term development as a player if it's something you can play with, to explore and experiment with.